of 2x6s out of cedar or something like that. This is the skirt board. My skirt board is going to be a piece of 1x10 clear fir. I chose this width so I'd have at least 2 or 3 inches from the top of my tread to the top of my skirt board. To find the length of this skirt board, I'd put a mark on the sheetrock which represented the top of my skirt board. I'd also put a mark up here. Now I'd extend this down through both points to the floor. Let's call this point A. I'd also extend this line upwards to a point where it intersected with the finished face of my top riser. Then I'd measure from point B to point A and lay that out at the proper angles on my finished skirt board. I'd then lay out the cuts that would be appropriate at the bottom and at the top for the kind of base trim I would be using. Remember I mentioned this notch. I cut this in my subfloor so my skirt board would slide right in. These are 12-penny finish nails I'm using here, and I'll probably put 1 or 2 in every stud. Now I've just finished installing the skirt board. Normally this wall would be sheetrocked entirely, but I've left an area off so I can show you some blocking which I've put in for our handrail. I've installed this blocking so the top of my handrail will be about 30 inches from the top of this tread, even with the face of this riser. Let me show you some of the types of handrails we might use. This is a piece of pine hand railing with a steel bracket, which we attach to the wall like this. This type of railing also comes in oak, and we could use a cast brass bracket for a dressier installation. I often prefer to make my own railing. This is a piece of clear fir, same type of wood as we have in our skirt board. It's a full 1 inch thick, and I've rounded the edges for smoothness. I've attached a spacer block to the back of the railing, so when I mount it on the wall, there'll be room between the sheetrock and the railing for my hand to slide. Now the stairs are ready for the carpet layer. I want to show you this model of our second stairway so I can explain some of the details of its construction. Our finished floor to finished floor height will be the same as in our first stairway, so our calculations of rise and run will also be the same. Now this is an L-shaped stair, and I'll explain in a minute how this landing just takes the place of one of our steps. In this stairway, instead of plywood for our risers and treads, we'll be using oak. We'll have the same cut carriages, but our carriage on this side will be our skirt board. This will be thicker because I'm going to route mortises to house our risers and treads. The finished skirt board on this side will be mitered to receive our risers. Up here, I've attached the carriages with a hanger board, just like in our first stairway. Up at the top here, I've attached our carriages by butting them into the header. I've also notched the carriage so it can rest on this ledger board. This stairway will have a starting newel and a landing newel. It'll have a handrail and a balustrade. Well, the first place to start with an L-shaped stairway is at the landing, so let's go. I'm marking here for the finished height of the landing. Now I want you to think of this landing as just another tread, except larger. In our staircase, the landing is the 7th tread, and I mark the finished floor height at 7 times the unit rise. For the framing, though, I have to come down 1.5 inches from this mark to account for the 3/4 inch landing subfloor and 3/4 inch oak flooring. I'm using 2x10s for the framing of the landing. And since I'm working alone here, I'll put this landing up piece by piece. If you have help, it'll be easier to build it in one piece on the floor and then nail it in place. This 2x4 is just a temporary leg to hold up the joist while I nail it off. This landing is really nothing more than a big box. You can also see it's not a square but a rectangle, because the carriages of the upper flight rest on one end. I want to frame in some walls underneath this stairway so we can close it off for use as a closet or a bathroom. The place to start is with a bottom plate. Once that's in, I can get a post under the landing and remove the temporary leg. This post is just a doubled 2x4. I'll get it plumb and then toenail it in place. Blocking is one of those things that you never miss until it's not there. I need blocking for baseboard, sheetrock, and skirt boards. The landing gets a layer of plywood right on top of the glue, just like a regular floor. I'm pulling my subfloor out 3/4 of an inch so it'll be flush with my hanger board. Now this hanger board is just like on the straight run stairs. I'll tack it in place and add more nails when I'm sure it's right. I'm positioning this carriage so that when I add a tread, the top of it will be 1 unit rise down from the top of the finished floor of the landing. You can see that this carriage fits pretty well to the hanger board. If yours doesn't, it may be a good time to double check your calculations. Make sure you haven't forgotten anything, such as dropping the carriage. Another common mistake is to forget your finished floor materials which aren't yet in place. You've allowed for them in your calculations, so don't forget them in your measurements. I'm using a level to find the height of the middle carriage. I could measure down like I did for the first one, but this way I'll be sure they'll both line up. I'm putting a few nails through the hanger board into the carriage like I did on our first stairs, but I probably won't use any clips because this is such a short flight. Once again, we're going to use a kickboard at the bottom of this stairs. You can see here that I've only got 2 cut carriages for this stairway. That's because the third one against the wall would be the house skirt board, and it'll be mortised to receive our treads and risers. If this was concrete, you'd have to bolt this down. Time now for the upper flight. I slide the top into place and flush the bottom up with the landing. I really prefer to rest the carriages on the landing rather than butting them into it. You can see that again I've left the plywood subfloor long to act as the top tread. I feel this is really important because it ties the carriages to the framing. I've laid out the carriages for the upper flight the same as I did for the bottom flight. I had to drop them by the thickness of a tread and add for the 3/4 inch finished flooring. Now at the top, instead of a hanger board, I'll be using a ledger board. This is because our carriages butt against the header. This ledger, like a kickboard, will keep our carriages from sliding down. The ledger is beveled, so we can sheetrock flush with the carriages. Now I need to do the framing under the stairway to close this off for a closet. First I put in a top plate so I have something to nail my studs to. I've got layout marks on the bottom plate. Instead of putting them on the top plate, I'll just use my level and mark it in place. This area under the stairs is too good to waste. It's a good spot for a half bath or a closet. It also makes for a nice private space used as a library or just shelving.